Welcome, everyone, to our kickoff of Dallas Startup Week series with Jasmine Fain. Every year, Dallas Startup Week brings together entrepreneurs and change makers for a week-long experience described as the largest entrepreneurial event in North Texas, where they exchange ideas, collaborate, and grow alongside the 10th largest startup ecosystem in the U.S. This year's event will be held at Southern Methodist University from August 1st to the 5th. Jasmine Fain, who's with me here, is one of our wonderful Dallas Startup Week speakers, and she uses her knowledge in social enterprise, startup business development, grant writing, and marketing to create spaces for underrepresented organizations and companies in our world. Her days are now spent serving as a nonprofit and social enterprise strategist. She teaches nonprofits to create cash flow without grants by scaling their revenue like a tech startup. She also is the CEO of Empower You, a social enterprise startup she established to create a marketplace for nonprofits to advertise their programs directly to Black and impoverished communities. Overall, she strives to close the nonprofit wealth gap that Black founders and their communities face in the nonprofit industry. She believes that even after we get a seat at the table, we must teach others to build a better table than the one we are sitting at. Everyone, please welcome Jasmine Fain.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kendall. And thank you to DEC and Dallas Startup Week for having me and allow me to kick off this series. So let me open up my presentations. We're going to get into a little bit about who I am, what do I do, and today we're going to talk about how to scale your nonprofit like a tech startup company. So let me pull up these presentation slides for you all. Okay. There we go. Make sure I am all set. Okay. So again, my name is Jasmine Fain, and today we're going to talk about teaching nonprofits how to scale like a tech startup, but most importantly, how to create cash flow without grants. So first, a little bit about me, the roles that I have served. I am a professional grant writer, but I like to call myself nowadays the anti-grant grant writer. Even though I trained for this, got a whole college degree in it, I completely switched my career path, and now I'm the anti-grant grant writer. I'm also, like Kendall said, a nonprofit and social enterprise strategist, and most importantly, I am the CEO of Empower You, which is a marketplace that we have developed to partner nonprofit programs to low-income communities and BIPOC communities. And then most importantly, Empower You is a Founder Gym 10 graduate. So I like to throw that achievement in there. So I want to take you on a little story of, I would say, my funding story, my journey with money. So this first picture is me, a young grant writer, because I did work as a grant writer throughout college and after college. And I was a grant writer here at Fort Oak Cliff, a nonprofit in Southern Dallas. And within this time space, I was on a team to write $1 million grant. And then also at the same time, I became the executive director over a scholarship program. And I was tasked with the huge responsibility to raise $2,000 in 2 weeks. Yes, you heard that correctly. $2,000 in 2 weeks. And you know, in the nonprofit world, that's like basically pulling money out of thin air. But I can say that even though money presented me with hardships, I completely funded that program, that scholarship program. I got the $2,000 in 2 weeks solely through investors, donations, and sponsorships. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to keep talking about these investors and donors and sponsors. So now here, I'm graduated. Ooh, let me put my full screen. Oh, yeah, I exited. Oh, okay. Present. Sorry, guys. Here we go. There we go. So this next one, I am a graduated college degree in hand, and I decided, let me go grant write in Cape Town, South Africa. I just took a whim. And during this process, I really saw on the other side of the world funding discrepancies in the NGO space. But most importantly, seeing these discrepancies, at the same time, I began to take this idea of starting my own tech startup and actually put in some force and some emphasis behind it. So I applied to the Founder Gym. I basically, studied Mandela's formula. And within 3 months after graduating, I had a full social enterprise tech startup. But working half within the social enterprise space and then, taking my knowledge in the nonprofit industry, I began to ask myself, why is it so hard for nonprofits to gain funding when I'm seeing I'm pretty much doing the same thing? I'm having a social impact in this space. Why can't they do the same thing as me as a social enterprise and scale revenue quickly? So then I like to talk about my graduation from Founder Gym. I graduated, I became a social enterprise, and I really broke into this space, understanding the ins and outs, the ups and downs. But most importantly, during this time period, I said, we are going to figure out how to get nonprofits to scale like tech startups. If I have all this knowledge, if I can in 3 months take an idea to completion with the whole team and break into the social enterprise space, then why can't nonprofits do the same? But overall, my story is money does not control how or when I make an impact. And I would like to tell you tonight, money does not control how or when you make an impact. You can see that throughout this whole course of my time spent in my life breaking into the social enterprise space, either I was given, no money, or I saw money discrepancies and funding discrepancies in NGOs, that I saw that money could be made, but questioning why money wasn't being made in a scalable way with nonprofits. And most importantly, I was told in 2 weeks to raise $2,000. And within that time frame, solely using sponsorships, donations, and investors, I raised the money, but it did not control how or when I made an impact. Did it come? Yes. Did it have some hardships coming? Yes, but it did not control how I made an impact. And that is the same for you too. Note that, keep it as an affirmation, write it down if you need to. So let's talk about a little bit why you need to raise like a startup company. So let's understand startups for a minute. And I really want us to understand the social enterprise startup space and kind of see some similarities and some comparisons to the same language that we use in the nonprofit industry. So first, startup company. A startup or startup company is a company or project initiated by an entrepreneur to seek and effectively develop a scalable business model. The key word is a scalable business model, especially when we're talking about funding. But let's look at the social enterprise startup space and break this down. So a social enterprise or a social business is a business that has specific social objectives. Does that sound very familiar to what a mission statement is? Doesn't a mission statement have specific social objectives that are laid out that serve its primary purpose? Okay, so stay with me. So now social enterprise seek to maximize profits while maximizing the benefits to society. Doesn't maximizing profits sound like fundraisers, while maximizing the benefits to society sounds like programs? So as you can see, there is very similar language, different wording, but very similar language to mission statement and programs and fundraisers. And of course, their profits are principally used to fund social programs. Again, that same language of fundraisers and programs. So as you can see, even though the tech startup space calls this the social enterprise space, you as a nonprofit fall within this space. Different language, but same values. And then I also like to give a little of a comparison so just you can see, how similar they are. So as a startup company, their startup companies are Zoom, the infamous Zoom that we're probably all have a love-hate relationship with by now. But Zoom is a tech startup company. Airbnb works in the hospitality space, but is a tech startup company. Blavity, which is a Black-owned media company, is a tech startup. And then Amazon, which we all love and probably too often use, is a tech startup. But when we look on the other side, or the social part of this space, we begin to see some 501c3s that we're real familiar with. Goodwill. Goodwill has thrift stores that generate them revenue, yet they are still a 501c3. The Salvation Army has the same similar model to Goodwill, has thrift stores and other stores that generate them revenue, but is a registered 501c3. Khan Academy, if most of you did not know, is a declared 501c3. But we look at it and we see it and we're like, oh, they have to be a for-profit company. They have to be making some type of money. They're too big to be like that. No, they're just a social enterprise startup. They're working in the startup space, but they are a registered 501c3. And then, as most people do not know, is that the NCAA is a registered 501c3. However, they generate revenue through ticket sales and sponsorships, strictly media sponsorships. And their program is the scholarships that they have, the partnerships with to the different schools. So as you can see, you fall within this space. You can be in this space. A lot of the companies that we took as for-profits are actually 501c3s. And even going into this, I want to kind of break us down on some social impact terms to know. First, if you're a nonprofit entering into this space, or even if you are a tech startup watching this, you will kind of be more familiar with these terms. But if you're a nonprofit, you got to know traction and data. What exactly is your traction and data? When we measure traction and data, it's usually in customers and users to prove your potential to an investor or a donor, in your case. A pitch deck, which is probably like the most important thing. And we're going to talk about pitches later, how to craft your pitch as a nonprofit. But, it's simply just a little presentation that helps potential investors learn more about you. And then KPIs are key performance indicators, measurable outcomes that can gauge your performance. But even I would like to say the statistics of how you're solving the problems in your community, the statistics of how your mission is running, the statistics of even your community members can be key performance indicators. And then your market value, knowing how you fetching up in the marketplace, and then also knowing how to calculate it also, because these are all terms that investors are going to want to hear when you come to pitch to them to get more money. And so let's break down for a minute the business models of both a nonprofit and for-profit. I want to show you the similarities between the two, because the thing that we're building up here is showing you that there's really no difference between a for-profit business model and a nonprofit business model. So first, nonprofits have a governing board of directors. For-profits have a governing board of directors and shareholders. Okay. Nonprofits, the product is human stories and programs. For-profits, the product is an inanimate item, typically most of the time. Nonprofits, the revenue is generated through fundraisers. For-profits, the revenue is generated through sales. Those sound very familiar, very similar. Nonprofits are has renamed investors to donors. But for-profits still have investors, the most common term that is used. Nonprofits can scale funding through grants, member investors, which are our donors, and sponsors. For-profits can scale funding through venture capital, through angel investors and sponsors. And even most recently, I've heard of venture capital firms creating spaces for nonprofits to get no equity given funding. And even going into that point, nonprofits, no equity is ever given. And for-profits, equity is given. And so that is probably the key point. We often hear the myth of nonprofits cannot make a profit, but really it's no equity can ever be given. This is why nonprofits do not have shareholders, but nonprofits can make a profit as long as the money goes back to the good of the organization. That is the key. I just want to say that again. We're going to dispel that myth today. Nonprofits can make a profit as long as the money goes back to the good of the organization. So now that we have this all in mind, we see the similarities. Broke it down, even down to revenue, down to that investors are donors, that we have products, that they're programs. Why haven't you become an entrepreneur yet? Just ask yourself that question for a minute. And like I said, why haven't you shifted your mindset to be an entrepreneur and a startup founder? We've broken down all the similarities. I've given you all the facts about why you should be in this industry, and I'm going to continue to give you facts about why there is more money and scalable revenue for you. But ask yourself, why haven't you shifted your mindset to become a startup founder, but before a startup founder, an entrepreneur, a full-time entrepreneur? So before we go on and talking about, revenue and all these different funding models, we have to acknowledge that the nonprofit industry progresses capitalism. We cannot talk money and funding without talking about capitalism in the American economy. But most importantly, we can't talk about the nonprofit industry, which is, in our tax system, without talking about this. So first, I want to talk about the gatekeepers of the nonprofit industry, and let me just pull up a little bit of some facts for you so you can kind of see this. So gatekeepers, when we talk about grant foundations, 92% of foundation executive directors are white. Whereas if you do the math, only 8% of nonprofit executive directors are persons of color. And then when we talk about nonprofit professionals like me and executives, we gatekeep. You come to us for advice. Some people, might not give the best as far as funding, but we gatekeep. And some people have different lived experiences. So it really depends on which nonprofit professional executives you come to, and if they can relate to whether, you come from a low socioeconomic status, whether you are a BIPOC person, that we gatekeep. I have to admit it, we do. We are the gatekeepers. And then, of course, wealth is another gatekeeper. When we talk about wealth, we definitely have to acknowledge the Black wealth gap. And then most importantly, we have to acknowledge the person of color wealth gap in this country. And so when we talk about financial inequality was greater in the overall total wealth in these statistics. The top 1% of the population owns 43% of the wealth. And the next 19%, which is typically probably your middle class range of Americans, own 50% of the wealth. But the bottom 80% only own 7% of the wealth. And so we know that a lot of our problems in society really foster in these communities that the bottom 80% are living within. That a lot of our nonprofits' missions are to solve the problems that the bottom 80% live within. But if you are a founder and you came from this bottom 80% and you only own 7% of the wealth, how do we raise funding when that is my lived experience that I've only known? And so let's talk about that for a little bit. I like to call this the nonprofit industry Lollipop. The commercial with the Tootsie Roll Lollipop. And I was like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? That is exactly how this works. So let's talk about this. It's itchy for a little bit. So we have this Lollipop, this Tootsie Roll, our nonprofit industry, or more importantly, the systemic lollipop that surrounds you as a nonprofit founder and the community members. So first, we have the wealth gap, like we just talked about. The bottom 80% only owns 7% of the wealth. So, and even if you are a middle class citizen, you only own roughly 50% of the wealth. And so, if you are a founder coming from this, you have this little candy layer over you, a wealth gap, and then you have your second layer. Your communities lack social capital and social awareness. And when we talk about social capital, again, if they are in the bottom 80% or a middle class citizen, they also have a wealth gap. But most importantly, social awareness. When we talk about social awareness, it's being aware of the resources that help you get out of a situation. But more importantly, it's the awareness of what good can come from my community. If I am living in the bottom 80%, more than likely we know it's in an impoverished state of mindset. An impoverished state of mindset causes a survival mindset to kick in. And when you are in a survival mindset, it doesn't matter about opportunities and this and that. It's like, how am I going to live day to day? So your communities that you work with, live within this mindset, have this survival mindset, because there's a lack of capital and a lack of social awareness. And then we cannot acknowledge capitalism without talking about racial biases and discrimination, unfortunately. And so if you are a BIPOC founder, you have racial biases and discrimination against you. I've experienced it within the nonprofit industry. I've heard many stories as far as when it comes to grant foundations, discriminating against people. So we have to acknowledge that it's there. And so, if you have all these layers to this Tootsie nonprofit industry, Tootsie Roll Pop, and you and your community members are in the center of it, what can we do to raise funding? If the grant foundations operate gatekeep, and when we say gatekeep, meaning they uphold this lollipop. If the grant foundations uphold this lollipop, if the nonprofit professionals and executives uphold this systemic lollipop, if wealth itself and capitalism upholds this systemic lollipop, then what do you do as a founder? Like, really ask yourself, is it worth breaking through all the ceilings, just to get a small grant or just to get a little bit of funding? But what is really important at the end of the day when it comes to raising funding in this system? And so I would like to remind you that, if you and your community members are in the middle, why not create fundraisers that are community-centric minded? And when we talk about community-centric, I like to read the overall definition so you gain a clear understanding of community-centric minded. Community-centric encourages mutual support between nonprofits and their communities through fundraisers to create a funding ecosystem that is sustainable for longer periods of time. Meaning, when it comes down to it, we're not thinking, let's go shoot for the grant. Let's go ask somebody out here who does not look like us and who cannot relate to our experience, for this and the grant and all this stuff. It's about, let me look at who's right beside me and if I can generate a funding ecosystem with them. We're talking about partnering with businesses of people who look like you, who come from the same experiences and backgrounds as you, and partnering together, even with your community members, having them in the forefront. Even if you have to survey them, ask them, hey, what do you like to do? A lot of them might like going roller skating. So if they like going roller skating, let's plan a roller skating fundraiser and have the community come out and participate, maybe charge a small fee at the door and raise money that way. But the key thing is keeping the community in mind when you're raising funds. A lot of time in the nonprofit industry, we are very donor minded first, outside the system, the gatekeepers first, and then our communities lack in the end because we're only throwing them the programs and not really involving them in the whole process. So we have to be community-centric minded when it comes to fundraisers. And then again, it's not about proving that you can break through the layers of the system. That's hard work. Every day, there's probably some things that I did not even talk about, in this system that people face every single day. And it's not about breaking through the layers and getting the award for breaking through the layers or getting a little funding for breaking through the layers. It's about building with those who are in the same fight as you know? So let's talk a little bit about gaining the big bucks from investors and sponsors. And let me just check my time real quick. Okay, I am good. So, gaining the big bucks from the investors and sponsors. Let's talk about that. This is the tech startup portion of all of this. Let's get into it, guys. So, this funding pyramid. So when you look at it real closely, guys, you see that your fundraisers and for-profit models are the largest portion of your funding or revenue that you're gaining as a nonprofit organization. And when we talk about for-profit models, for example, like I gave Goodwill and Salvation Army, they created separate LLCs for their thrift stores just to fund the money back into their organization. So those are for-profit models, which we have been, especially the thrift store model, which we have been seeing a lot. But you can create a separate LLC to fund your nonprofit. The key thing is when I tell people that they can do that is also, anything that you own under that 501c3 is owned by the IRS or the government. So if you start an LLC directly under that, for that, you could, if you ever left your organization, you probably will not be keeping your business if it is formed under that. But however, if you do form it in your own name or in your family name, and you're just saying, we formed this LLC, and then we're going to take a portion of the proceeds and just give it to our nonprofit. You are safe. If the IRS or something or audit came and ever took your nonprofit away, your business is still safe and you still got revenue for your personal self. So just know, like I've seen it many times where people start LLCs under the nonprofit, and then when they're like, I don't want to do the nonprofit anymore, they lose all of their livelihood. So please, guys, do not do this. And so next are sponsorships. This is our next main portion of revenue of funding. Sponsorships can be corporate sponsorships. They can be like we were talking about with these local businesses. Sponsorships can come from anywhere, especially in the age of the Instagram influencer. Sponsorships are everywhere. Every small business is on Instagram. Every nonprofit is on Instagram. And you really just have to create a wish list of who you want to reach out to. Just write them down. Literally, I tell people, there is no one that is too far out of your reach to really ask money from or gain a partnership from. You just have to ask. Write down a wish list. Even if you want to name Bill Gates, the biggest person, I tell them shoot high and then shoot low. Go into the dream world and then be realistic, because you still need money at the end of the day. Write you down a wish list of every company, person you want to partner with, and then really figure out, okay, how do I need to craft this email to really convey to them, our traction, what we've been doing, and then also our mission and what we need out of them, and then continue to build a relationship. Follow up with them. Don't haggle the people, but follow up with them and build a relationship. This industry, when it comes to gaining revenue, is all about relationship building. You have to build a relationship with your sponsors. Well, even before your sponsors, you have to build a relationship through your fundraisers and your programs with the community. You have to build a relationship with your sponsors. And then next, going into our investors, which is our third biggest portion of our funding. These are people which we call high-level donors, but I call them investors. If you're getting that much money, you're an investor into my nonprofit. These are the third largest portion that your revenue should be made up of. And then we go into donations. Now, earlier, I did say, we call donors investors in the nonprofit world. But when I'm talking about donations here, I'm talking about the little donations, the little button on your website that that people constantly give to. But even we need to scale it down for a little bit and think about our community members who give what they have because they appreciate what we do. It's the mother who saw that you helped her, and she gives like $25, every month because she appreciates what you did for her. It's the little kid who, got into college because of you. And so he sends $10 and gives $10 to your organization because he's really grateful for the position that you put him in. Those are the donations that matter also. Oftentimes in the nonprofit world, we flip this. We go fundraisers, donations, donors, which are investors, and then we'll think about sponsorships later. No. That puts too much pressure on you to find all these donations. That puts too much pressure on you to gain all these investors and these high-level donors. Because let's be honest, everyone doesn't check their emails all the time. And so when you don't get a response back or you get a no, now you're stressed out because I needed that money, I needed this relationship. Take the pressure off of yourself. Build your fundraisers first in your for-profit models. Then let's talk about sponsorships. And we'll talk, I believe we're going to talk about in my next slide about sponsorships easing up your budget. And then investors. Now we can talk about the high-level donors as we go up and up and up. But we already have 2 solid revenue models that is generating us sustainable revenue. Now let's talk about the donations and the small level donations that our community is giving to us. And then lastly, our grants, the infamous grants. And often we turn this pyramid upside down, and grants you start a nonprofit and you say grants are first, then I'm gonna think about my fundraisers. If I get time to do that, I need a donor, then we're gonna get donations, and then maybe we'll get a little bit of sponsorship. And then if I want to focus on my fundraisers, I can. That is a bad foundation to have. Your fundraisers and your programs are your core foundation. Grants are last. But Jasmine, why are grants last? Like I said, I'm the anti-grant grant writer, and that is not just emotions. I'm going to give you some facts behind that. Guys, grants should only be 2% of your overall annual budget. You can have all the faces like these memes like, oh my goodness, only 2%? Yes, only 2%. Because as we talked about before, there is gatekeepers, there is systemic discrepancies against you, no matter your race, gender, when we come into this nonprofit industry. And we already know grant foundations are gatekeepers to this industry. So why stress yourself out trying to get money from the gatekeepers when, like we talked about, we can go and do some community-centric funding, community-led funding, look at the people right next to us and create an ecosystem where you give to me, I give to you. I asked the community what they like to do. We generated a fundraiser, so they constantly come out now because we're crafting fundraisers around what they like to do. This community-centric funding is more sustainable than constantly going back to this broken system and asking for grants. So 2%, like I said, have your clutching your pearls gas moment, because they should only be 2% of your overall annual budget. So let's break down what are the responsibilities of sponsors, donors, investors as far as the nonprofit industry. Because they have some responsibilities that are a little bit different than a responsibility of a tech startup, your traditional tech startup. So again, I did put it in my slide. Sponsors, donors, and investors are there to give you an allowance. An allowance, meaning you should already have revenue. You should already have a little something in your bank account. And then when they come, they're giving you allowance. They're taking the pressure off of your fundraisers. They're not there to fund the whole organization. Now, you can fund the whole organization off sponsorship, donors, and investors. But if you are able to do that, you're just taking pressure off of yourself. You say, we have these fundraising system in place. We have these programs in place. We got all of our sustainable models first. We are not grant-minded first. And then when a sponsor, donor, or investor comes in, they want to fully fund the nonprofit for the whole year. Well, let's just move the money we already made from the fundraisers, the money we already made with the community, and let's just move it to the next year so we can continue to be sustainable. So their responsibilities: one, to ease up your budget, like we just talked about. Two, they should give back to your community and mission also. Get them to volunteer too. Do not, when you're evaluating sponsors, donors, and investors, get people who understand your experiences. They should not just come into your community to take a photo op and to be, look at how well I'm doing and giving my money to these people. No, they need to be actively participating and helping solve the mission just as much as you're helping to solve the mission, and then they should not take or require equity in payments. Remember, we already dispelled the myth that nonprofits cannot, we dispelled the myth that nonprofits can't make a profit, but we know that nonprofits can make a profit. But the key word in that myth is we are not supposed to take equity. So if your investor comes to you, if you get in a pitch competition, right, and they're like, well, in order for you to gain this money, that we need to take equity in your company, in your nonprofit. No, that is not an investor for you. You're going to be breaking so many IRS rules. So please do not even do that to yourself. And then the last responsibility is they are to look at your data and to see if you are a good investment. Like we talked about in the social impact terms, to know, you need to know the data on your community. Let me just tell you that data is a gold mine. We know in this emerging space of technology that it is, but even for you as a nonprofit, your data is a gold mine. I'm telling you, I have seen high level nonprofits. I'm telling you, the ones, as soon as you type in nonprofits on Google, they pop up. Literally ask smaller level nonprofits to run their programs and say, oh, we're just going to pay you a little stipend or, provide the people for you, and take their data on the back end. This is happening in our industry. And it wasn't about the program. It wasn't about the smaller nonprofit. It was because they needed the data on a lower socioeconomic community. They needed the data on BIPOC persons, and they are typically, we know our high-level nonprofits are white-led or have majority white directors, boards, and presidents, and so they don't have the lived experiences to be able to connect and go into these communities to do it. So they go and take smaller level nonprofits data. So if you are a smaller level, medium-sized nonprofit or a large nonprofit, know that your data is a gold mine. That is where your wealth resides. And that is what sponsors, donors, and investors are looking for. They are looking to see, how is she or he or they moving the needle on the statistics and the data in their communities. If you go and tell an investor that our mission, I'm trying to think of something randomly, but our mission solves hunger, and then you go in, maybe let's say look in DFW and maybe say 50% of the families in DFW are dealing with hunger. And then you take that and you go to an investor and say, we solve hunger. That is our mission. But we know that 50% of the 50% of the people in DFW deal with hunger. But our organization has solved that problem by 30%. Let me tell you, you are a good investment because you are moving the needle. It's no longer the fact of this is our mission, this is what we do, and if you give us money, maybe we'll do it, or you should just have all these emotions for my mission as I do and believe in me and just give me the money. No. Prove that you can move the needle. Just like if you were a tech startup and needed traction and can prove that your customers actually want this product, the same mindset has to be applied. Prove that you can move the needle. And trust me, investors and donors will be knocking on your door and having conversations and talking to each other and saying, you need to invest in them. So, I wasn't going to leave out pitching because I love to pitch, but, I definitely want to tonight help you craft your 60-second pitch using your mission and vision statement. So we're going to read through this and then we're going to break it down. But I really want you to take this and have this because this is so important. Whether you're having a conversation with an investor, you're having a conversation with me as a nonprofit professional, with the donor, you want to be able to tell in 60 seconds or a minute what your mission, what your vision statement is, and what you overall do. Whew. So let's read this. And when you're reading this, I want you to check yourself to see if you can find the mission and vision statement in this. So, Lifeline Volunteers works with lower income medical students who are typically in their first 2 years of medical school to establish a solid foundation in their careers through internships, medical service awareness, and mentorship programs. Internships and mentorship programs. We seek to defeat the stigma that early experience is not available in the medical field and give opportunities to those who want to advance their medical careers early on. So now that we have read this, let's break down where the mission vision statement is. So, this red is actually, so this is your target audience. So when we read that statement, works with lower income medical students, that is who you'll work with. That is your community members, your target audience who are in their first 2 years of medical school. And then where is the mission and vision statement? Which one are which? The blue is the mission statement. Through internships, medical service awareness, and mentorship programs. And you might be like, Jasmine, that's a small mission statement. But overall, this is the mission statement. But I wanted to point this out. Your mission statement is similar to a thesis statement. You remember how your English teacher in grade school used to drill into you? A thesis statement. You need to wrap up your 3 points that you're going to talk about in your essay. Wrap up your 3 points. I'm telling you the same thing. Wrap up your 3 points, but your points are now your programs. As you can see in this mission statement, what are their programs? They do internships. Their other program is outreach, which is medical service awareness. Their third program is, like it says, mentorship programs. These are their 3 programs. So your mission statement needs to wrap up your 3 programs and then keep it pushing. And then lastly, your vision statement. We seek to defeat the stigma that early experience is not available in the medical field. The vision statement is your overall impact that you want to have. We prove here who our community was, right? That's great. We work with these people in the first 2 years of medical school. Okay, great. We have these programs. But just because you say who your community members are, and what programs do you do is not telling people, okay, what is the overall impact or problem that they are trying to solve? And as you can see here, that the overall impact they're trying to make is to defeat the stigma that early experience is not available in the medical field and give opportunities to those who want to advance in their medical careers early on. And y'all, that is your 60-second pitch. And so, lastly, I want to talk about, can nonprofits have an exit plan? I wasn't going to leave that out also, and which is not familiar for nonprofits to have an exit plan. And let me just tell you, yes, you can have an exit plan, but it's not an IPO. It's not being private. Your exit plan is for you as the nonprofit founder or president and CEO. It is for you to understand that you cannot do this work forever. I'm telling you, as someone who has been in it for a while, you cannot do this work forever. We talked about earlier, people's stories are your product. Programs that benefit other people are your product. Do you know how emotionally heavy that is? How mentally heavy that is on you? You cannot do this work forever. The goal of any startup really is to scale as quickly and then exit. To exit, move on to different things, maybe leave it alone. And for you as a nonprofit, you have to have the same mindset. You have to scale as quickly as a social enterprise startup founder. As a nonprofit founder, you have to scale as quickly. And then your exit, leave the game. Build your nonprofit to where it's sustainable in revenue, and then hire a president. Hire another CEO. Delegate the task to someone else. Or maybe you want it to stay in your family long term. Write it somewhere that you want your children to be the next president or someone else. But exit this game because it is mentally, physically and emotionally taxing on you. You know, when we talk about tech startups, that is mentally taxing, but we're not dealing with human stories. Every single day you see the problems that's going on in your community, and you're intaking that, and you feel the emotional weight, and you're going home at night thinking, how can I solve this problem better for so-and-so? You know, when there's an emergency coming up, your mom, dad, brother, and sister, to a lot of different people, learn to delegate and exit this game. And so that is the end of my presentation. I just wanted to say that if you enjoyed this, that I do some coaching. I have a free webinar coming up. So if you want to learn specifically how to get those fundraisers intact, how to get those programs intact, and how to scale your nonprofit revenue without grants, here is the link to that webinar. And there's multiple webinars coming up, so don't think if I miss it next week, am I gonna miss it forever, Jasmine? No. Like as long as you register for the link, you'll be notified of when all the webinars come up. And then of course you can join my Funding Fighters newsletter, where I break down the realness of the nonprofit industry and go into detail what is going on, so you can be aware of what is restricting your funding. And note that at times, sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it might be you, I ain't gonna lie. But you know, it's not every time it's you, and you have to understand the system that is against you and how to work through that system. And then, of course, you can go on my website, jasminefain.com, and I do write blog pieces there. But most importantly, I would love to announce that, you know, I have a Cashflow Without Grants Summit coming up. And so, no more grants, no more denials, guys. It is a 2-day summit designed to end the tiring grant follow-up process and teach you how to take control of your budget while gaining $200,000 in additional revenue from sponsors and investors. Trust me, I have had clients who have become fully funded by the end of 2020, in the midst of a pandemic. They fully funded their nonprofit. So if you would love to join this summit, it is, of course, a small, intimate setting. So don't feel like it's this big like summit and you're not going to be able to talk to me. No, this is a small, intimate setting, so I can get to know you one-on-one. I can get to understand your story and your nonprofit's revenue one-on-one. And then also so you can collaborate with like-minded people, and we can just build the revenue up from there. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely go to this link right here and you can register for that. And I just want to say thank you again to Dallas Startup Week, to the deck, for having me to kick off this series. You can find me. I will be at Dallas Startup Week. So if you want to tune into my session there, you definitely can. But follow me on social media. I answer my DMs and my emails, guys. So if after this you're like, I want to reach out to her, I want to talk more about this conversation with her, please, I answer all this stuff. You can find me on Facebook. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but most importantly, I post tons of advice on Instagram, video stories. I do IG lives with other nonprofit professionals talking about creating cash flow without grants. So you can follow me on Instagram also and catch all that content and latest nonprofit industry news. But that is all that I have. Let me stop sharing my screen. And we can take questions too now. Yeah.
Yes, Jasmine, thank you so much. I have not ever seen that comparison of for-profit and nonprofit, and that was a really great input that you had there. And I didn't realize how similar they really are.
Yes, yeah.
And we had, just while you were talking to, we had some that were saying, wow, what a great comparison.
Yeah.
So we do have just a few questions to end the night. One is, what would you recommend for a nonprofit founder that is just starting that may not have data? How would you recommend approaching funders who focus on data?
Yeah, so I tell people that before you even get the 501c3, no, the 501c3 is just a little piece of like stick paper or information in the system that says you're a registered nonprofit. But before you even get into that, you know, you can get into your communities and really ask them and survey them. You can survey anyone pretty much, as long as at the end of the survey, the people consent to being surveyed, of course. But that is how you gain data, is through surveying them. I can say early on as a grant writer, I remember in Floral Cliff, if anybody knows Taylor Torrance, he literally made us like walk around with physical pieces of paper surveys and walk around the community and drive around the community and get information from our community members. And then we have the data at the end of the day to prove, this is how we're moving the needle. This is what our community needs. So it's as simple as getting the street team, printing out some surveys, if you want to go out during COVID or online, taking you a tablet and just surveying the community members and getting the data, but also to be able to prove your market, research. Understand, even as a nonprofit, we have different varieties of nonprofits like health and food pantries. Understand your specific industry. Even though the overarching theme is a social enterprise startup, you have to know what your niche is also, and then know the statistics around your niche and your community social economic status.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much. Last question we have is, so in kind of in the middle of your presentation, you talked about being community centric. So how do current startups continue to be that way? How do you focus on that when you are starting up?
Yeah, so most importantly, community-centric funding is a term. They're actually called community-centric fundraising, but they're a company. But it was the term coined by them, the actually community-centric fundraising. So if you want to see their objectives, you can definitely go on their page. I really like their model, and I was kind of implementing their model, but when I saw them, I was like, ooh, someone who's like-minded, because I was calling it community-led fundraising. But how to continue to be that way, it's really, again, that survey and asking your communities, what do they like to do? Like I gave the example of the roller skating rink, but it's also partnering with local businesses also, because oftentimes these local businesses are in the same position as you. And so it's simply going to them and saying, hey, we have a nonprofit. Can we do like a fundraiser night here? Or, hey, can we build a partnership where if you donate 15% of your proceeds, people who eat at your restaurant can get free programming from us. You really have to learn where you can give and take when it comes to community-centric fundraising, because of course we're all in the same boat, so we're all trying to raise revenue together. But if we go together, if we give and take together, it'll be a way quicker process than I'm getting my money, so I'm gonna go to the top, and then if you want to learn from me, I'll teach you later. No, like we have to build up together. So that's really what community centric is. And then going back to the communities, survey them and ask them what they want to do. Like I've seen nonprofits do like snowboarding trips, because the community's like, we like snowboarding, we'll pay, $1,000 to $2,000 for a snowboarding trip, and they banked off of a fundraiser, but they were community minded first. They asked them what they like to do. They said snowboarding. They planned a whole snowboarding trip, and then they banked on it. So
yeah, that's great. That's totally true. I am a skier myself, so I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Jasmine, thank you so much for your time. Yes. Incredible background, and you're just hard work and helping our community and helping us understand fully that nonprofits are very similar to for-profits, and that it's totally doable for anyone. So thank you so much for your advice and your enthusiasm. And we look forward to seeing you at Dallas Startup Week.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jasmine.
All right.